Everybody doing well today? Yeah? Fantastic. I don't know who that was, but I don't believe you. Oh, Jeff. Well, we know about Jeff, don't we? Yeah. Well, I appreciate y'all coming out. We've got a good crowd here. We're continuing our quarterly employee meetings. We've got one this afternoon as well. And as I say, always say at these meetings is invite your friends to come with you in the future. We want to get as many folks out as we can to touch base on some things going on in the organization and really to answer questions that you all might have or hear comments that you might have. And I'm hopeful that as time goes on, people feel more and more comfortable about throwing questions out and making comments because we need to hear that stuff. And that's one of the purposes of this meeting. We have an agenda for you today, I think that we handed out in the back, as well as an overview of our budget, which I'm going to talk about for a few minutes. But some other really important things going on. Obviously, the budget is eating up a lot of time, and it has for quite a few months. Obviously, a very important part of what we do each year because it helps to fund the services and the work that we all do. I think there's some good things in this budget we'll talk about in a minute. But the strategic plan is also a big focus of what we want to touch base on today and that we're going to continue to talk to you all about, engage you in as we go forward. For the very first time, the Board of Supervisors has approved a strategic plan for Stafford County. And I kind of want to say just in the nick of time because of growth and change that we're experiencing in this community, I think you've got to step back and look at that future and say, boy, what are we going to do to make sure we don't just get run over by Northern Virginia, which is basically our challenge here. And so the work that the board did over this past year on the strategic plan is really critical work. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to continue to try to educate you all on that, engage you more in it. Some folks are very involved in some of the priorities that were established, but all of us really are a part of that strategic plan, and we'll talk specifically about how that is in terms of organizational excellence as well. But we also want to get you up to date on some organizational work that's been going on around our vision and values for this organization. You all have been engaged to some degree with your departments, and we're going to be coming out to you in the future and getting some more feedback and engagement from you on that. And then finally, one thing I think that's on probably everybody's mind is the pay and classification study that was done. We are at the point right now of finishing some analysis on that plan, and we'll ultimately run some numbers to figure out which of you all might be far behind the market and therefore needs to move to a different place so that we can get you up in a competitive position against positions in Prince William and Spotsy and the city in Charlottesville. I'm sorry. That's really one of those old things, you know, it just came out. But the city of Fredericksburg. But we've got a whole benchmark group that we've looked at to help us make some decisions about how we should move our workforce forward in terms of market pay. So really important stuff today to talk about, and I appreciate you all coming out again. A handout was provided to you on the budget. Looks kind of like this. I want to thank our communication staff for some really great work on enhancing our communication out to our citizens and also to you all. As you look at that piece of paper, there's a whole bunch of stuff on it. And I'm going to kind of just hit some highlights. The budget process has been underway for over a month now. We've had some work sessions with the Board of Supervisors. There's a proposed budget that the staff put together based on the board's strategic plan, the challenges that we're faced with growth, and then some of the mandates and commitments that we have to fulfill in the budget. Those have been the big drivers this year in terms of what we've put together and what we propose to the board. Those items are really laid out there before you. If you look at the FY 2020 proposed budget initiatives heading there with all the strategic priorities listed, that gives you a little summary of the kind of things that we're trying to do against the board's priorities that they established. You know, as an example on the first one, healthy growth is about trying to manage the growth that we're experiencing here so that it doesn't overrun us, like I said, the Northern Virginia thing. And so we're doing some pretty significant work on looking at our comprehensive plan, our zoning ordinances, and so forth. And that's driven the need for some positions. There you can see those as an example. But little highlights under each of those areas. I won't go through those in any detail. Addressing growth over there in the bottom of the right-hand column. Again, we're talking about the growth that we're experiencing in terms of enrollment in our school system. They have some significant needs because their student population keeps going up. If you don't know it, Stafford, along with Loudoun and Prince William, have 20% of their population is school-aged children. And nobody else in the state has that. That puts us in a group of really large, fast-growing localities, and it's sort of that indication of why we're challenged with the things that we need to do as we look to the future. But this budget includes some funding for the school system to try to keep up with growth. One of the major things that's going on in the budget process, and sort of the primary update I wanted to share with you all, we did provide this out to you all through email. You can get to it pretty easily on our website if you want to look deeper. But since the budget was proposed, which maintained the current tax rate at 99 cents, the board has had some work sessions and has decided to advertise the tax rate at $1.03 instead of 99 cents. If you don't recall, last year they increased taxes 3 cents with the reassessment. They didn't drop the rate down. They could have dropped it down further to help pay for some of these challenges. We've done a lot of work with the board to engage them and help them understand some of the challenges that we're faced with and the community's faced with as we grow. This school system challenge is a big one. Big push this year from the school system, because they feel their teacher salaries are behind, is to do a 5% pay raise for teachers. I'm sure you've read about some of that. We had supported a 2.5% pay raise in the proposed budget for our staff and also to support teachers for a raise. That actually met some obligations for the state on a 5% raise to match the revenues they were giving us. So last year we did 2.5 for teachers, and we had 2.5 here. To meet the state mandate, if we wanted to get some more revenues, we had to do the 2.5 and 5 over 2 years. But they proposed actually 7.5 over 2 years. So that's what the board has been working with and struggling with in terms of how to support our teachers and our staff. And the good news is there's a lot of support for whatever happens to the teachers to happen to all the staff, whether local government or in the school system, whether teachers or administrative staff. So that's what they're struggling with, I think, most of all. They wanted to advertise a rate that would allow them the flexibility to do more than the 2.5%. And that would also require a tax increase to do it. So they've given themselves that opportunity. The public hearing is on the 2nd, next Tuesday, and it's actually going to be at Brook Point High School. We expect a large crowd. We had this room full on one of our work sessions recently. So a lot of folks are very engaged, and it's real important. We are in a difficult market in terms of pay. If you don't know, when you cross the Prince William line, if you work up there, the state gives them more revenue to help pay for salaries. So they have a little bit more revenue to take care of the needs that they have. We happen to be on this borderline where we're not getting as much revenue as Northern Virginia. So challenging market is the whole point. It's one of the reasons that we put so much emphasis on trying to give raises each year, and on top of that, look at the market and put some more pay aside to help get you all moved up to where you should be so we can convince you to stay here. It's hard to compete against Prince William, but obviously if the gap is this big, it's a lot harder. We're trying to close that gap. This budget, in addition to the 2.5% cost of living increase, if you will, it has about $2 million in it for implementing over a 2-year period the market study that we've done. So what we're proposing to do, and you're going to hear more about, and I won't steal your thunder there, Shannon. She's back there shaking her head, is over 2 years to implement this. We've got $2 million set aside in the first year to begin that process. We've defined our market differently. In the past, we sort of have just looked at maybe Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg. What we've done this year is we've gone outside of that, and Shannon will tell you more about some of the larger localities that we're comparing ourselves with to get our pay in a more competitive position. But With that said, big story here, big update is the $1.03 advertised tax rate, which may allow the cost of living increase to go higher. The market pay is in there. The board hasn't suggested any discussion about not funding that. I think they're very supportive and know that we need to move forward with that. So beyond the pay increases and the market study, as you look under the final area of organizational excellence, you'll see that most of the things that I've just talked about are in there. We have included some positions in this budget as well to support the work that we're doing, which is very important. Those are sort of sprinkled throughout this update, if you will. But in terms of the organization, we've increased our training support. We have another position for professional development and training that we have proposed in this budget. And we have a project manager really to help across all the departments with some of the big initiatives that are underway, including the strategic plan. So a lot of things. I'll just rattle off some of the positions that are in this budget, just so you have a sense of what we've included. Two sheriff's deputies to help with recruitment of officers. If you don't know, they're having a hard time filling their positions, and they wanted some recruitment support, so we've got 2 deputies in there and some administrative support. For fire rescue, we added a new engine crew last year, but it was a half a year, so we had to put the other half year of funding in. In terms of our non-public safety positions, a P-card administrator, a county attorney, a couple purchasing positions, the Commonwealth's attorney, many years with growing caseloads, has never had any additional staff. So there's a new Commonwealth's attorney and a legal secretary. In Public Works, we've got a stormwater technician. In Parks and Rec, we've got 2 part-time maintenance workers, 3 social service workers, a planning and zoning long-range planner position, and in HR, we've got an additional person to support their efforts and help us to move some of that work forward, and also a professional and organizational development specialist, which I mentioned before. A few positions in utilities, public information officer, and some utilities line workers. So all of that is to say that this budget has actually a lot of support for staff and for pay and benefits. I think it's the things that we've been struggling with over the years, so I think some very good news. You might say, well, gosh, if the tax rate didn't change, how did we fund all that? Pretty dramatic reallocation of funding in this budget from certain areas over to areas that we felt were most important. Otherwise, we would have had to propose a tax increase, but we were able to hold the line on that and still get all of these things done. So good news in this budget. Just wanted to give this kind of quick overview. Strong focus on the strategic plan and trying to move that forward, addressing the challenges of growth, and then every year we've got some of these mandates that we have to address, and those are included in this budget too. The process going forward with the board, they have a work session on the 2nd along with the public hearing, and then one more work session on the 9th of April, and on the 16th they're scheduled to adopt the tax rate and finalize the budget. So these next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks will be all the final decisions will be made and so forth. So that's overview, and I just wanted to share that with you. Are there questions or comments? Yes, ma'am. Katie. Good.
So you said that the board advertised $1.03 to potentially, given the possibility to support a 5% pay raise and other items for schools, did that also give them the flexibility to bring fairness on both sides that potentially the county would receive a 5% pay increase as well?
Yes, and I was not very clear about that. The reason that they say went to $1.03 instead of maybe $1.02 or something was because there was a principle there that whatever happened for the school employees would happen for county employees. So that is the amount roughly that's necessary to assure that everybody gets a 5% raise, local government and school employees. Thanks for asking that to clarify. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So the schools recently identified some savings in their health benefits fund,
What's been going on with that is the school system was supposed to take the savings that they had and put it into something called OPEB. Okay, so this is money that we have to set aside to take care of our liability for long-term care for our retired employees, just in the simplest way I can say it. And there's been a new requirement in terms of auditing and financial reporting that you have some of that liability taken care of. So each year, as we've had any savings, we've transferred it over to this OPEB trust fund, and the school system has not been doing that. So what they're proposing to do is they have now a huge amount of money, because for several years they weren't doing anything with it. And what they're planning to do is to meet some of that OPEB obligation, but also to give this holiday on health care. What we have decided to do is any of that savings that we see going forward, so not what's happened in the past, which is creating the money you're talking about, but what's going forward, what we've decided to do in this proposed budget is to reallocate any of the money we don't think we're going to need for health care over to pay raises. Okay, so that's one of the reasons we've been able to balance this budget without a tax increase. The money that you're putting in and the money that the county's putting in on your behalf for the total premium, because it's made up of an employee and employer share, is any savings that we're seeing, we're trying to shift it over to pay to help get us closer to market. And we found out that our health insurance premiums that you all are paying are very competitive, particularly for family. It's possible in the future that they're so competitive that we might have to inch those up. We're not proposing that this year. But the other things that you're paying are very, very low. And so even when we look at Northern Virginia and we say we're competing with them, well, actually, their folks are paying higher health care costs. So we're trying to get our pay and our benefits about in the same place so that folks won't feel like they got to go up the road for jobs. So a lot of important things going on there in terms of moving money to priorities. Other questions?
I have a comment.
Yes, absolutely.
In that whole discussion, it kind of seems like where the schools do not follow the regulations or required to follow, they benefit by having 6 months of not having to pay your savings, whereas we base depends on our paycheck.
The idea that they benefited or the employees benefited from something that they didn't do, that they should have done. That was for all of you when you retire to make sure that we're still sound. And I know you do. I think from time to time on both sides of the street things like this happen, and it may not be for something that somebody should have done and didn't do, but we do think if we've got extra money, how might we apply that to the benefit of employees? And in this case, they're so flush with money in that balance in their health fund that was just one of the things they chose to do. I think we've had holidays here before when we've been in a circumstance for some particular reason. So it just didn't happen to be where we are now. But yeah, I get your point. For some 6 months, they're going to have more money in their paycheck than you are as a result of that. What we're trying to do is to make sure you get a competitive pay and benefits, and that we put you in a much better position than you've been in the past. And that's the progress we've focused on. I will say that if you have a family and you work for the school system, you pay close to double the premium. So over there on that side, they're paying a lot more for their health insurance than we are on this side. And that's an important factor. If you ever need to look at that, we can show you that. Their family health. The issue is, they compare themselves with other school systems, and we compare ourselves with other local governments. We're about in the market, and they're about in the market too. So in school systems, there's a much higher cost for family health insurance. We talked about trying to get those equal, but that's a tough thing too, because that means we got to pay a lot more. They get to come down, and we're not sure that even makes sense because we're different markets in terms of schools and local government. Yes?
So we're not on the same, I thought we did a joint healthcare where we're all on the same.
We have the same provider, but the school board and the Board of Supervisors have different ways that they're sharing the premium cost with employees. Okay, but the same provider, so we have the same health care coverage and so forth, but the premiums have not been aligned all the way, and family is the biggest place where there's a difference. And like I said, if they look at other school systems, they're about where they should be. And local governments, we are the ones actually, when we look at other local governments, we're actually doing a little bit less on our premium, paying a little less. You all are. Yes.
I have a comment question. So if they didn't pay into the fund for their retirement, are they going to have money when they get ready to retire?
Yeah, so what they, I'll try not to throw numbers around. They had such a large amount that they were able to take a big portion of it and put it in that trust fund. So I think they're going to be fine. They need to continue to attribute to it going forward. And some of this is a financial reporting and an accounting kind of thing, that on the books there's this obligation. A lot of localities are not doing as much as they should. School system probably should do more, but I don't think anybody's retirement benefits are in jeopardy as a result. Yes, ma'am.
Personal property tax rate, the advertised rate stayed the same at 6.46.
It did, no change. The real estate rate is the only thing that's being considered now. Other questions?
I have
Yeah.
a question. It doesn't have to do with the budget. Is that
Got our
right?
gene cake.
Yeah. I was going to say, as long as it's not about jeans, yeah. Yes, Karen?
I was just wondering, we worked so hard with the task force on communications and having internal communication. I was just wondering why we didn't hear something about the new CFO coming. I guess the communication came out Saturday, but I think there was something published in Montgomery County in the paper on Friday.
Right.
So if you didn't check your emails during the weekend,
Yeah.
you didn't know until Monday. So I was just
Yeah.
thinking with internal communication, that's kind of.
Yeah, I hear you. That legitimate concern, and I can tell you that we had it all coordinated so that you would hear first. And somebody in Montgomery talked to the press, and we got caught behind the 8 ball, and that's why we sent it out on Saturday. But we had it set up so that that wouldn't happen. Some people didn't stick with the agreement, and we couldn't control that. So that is what happened. That was definitely not our intention. Sorry that it did occur that way. Alex Espinoza is going to be our new Chief Financial Officer. He starts on April 29th. As you all know, Mary has been with us for a long time, done some great work. Since she's been here, we've gotten 3 AAA bond ratings from the 3 agencies that rate us on that. She's done a fantastic job. It's time she wants to retire. I guess we got to let her go if she wants to. But we've got somebody with really great experience, Montgomery County, Maryland. Alex comes from there where he's the finance director. Has about 25 years of experience in total. If you're not familiar with Montgomery County, they're sort of like Fairfax in Maryland. So he comes from a large organization, a lot of good experience, and we're excited to have him start. So that announcement just came out. Other questions? Could be on anything.
I appreciate you keeping the health premiums lower.
Yeah, she just set me up, so we can't. Yeah, I don't think that we want those to stay lower than our comparator groups as much as we can. So we'll spend some more time talking about it over the next year. But yeah. All righty, I've eaten up a lot of this meeting. I appreciate the questions and comments, and we've got an opportunity for that more at the end as well if anything else comes up that you want to ask about. But we're going to shift gears real quick and talk about our strategic plan a little bit more. You all have the big 7 priority areas. Mike Smith is going to come and talk a little bit more about the strategic plan with you. Just a couple minutes.
Okay. Wonderful. So I'm going to talk about the strategic plan. I don't know how much you guys have heard about it, but basically the board got together. And first of all, I talk a lot faster than Tom, so this won't take that long. The board got together in June of last year and had a retreat, a 2-day retreat, and they talked about where do they want to see the county in 20 years. So if you go on staffordva.gov/2040, you can get the whole plan and you can read their vision and see what they want to do. So they decided this is where we want Stafford to be in 20 years. And then they said, okay, how do we get there? What are the steps to get there? And they laid out these 7 priorities with specific actions that they wanted to see happen. And that's what's in the sheet that's got the different priorities underneath it. And the ones that are underlined are the first year priorities, the ones we're working on right now. So I just wanted to touch quickly on a couple of them and then take any questions that you might have. So as Tom mentioned, we have an issue on healthy growth. Right now we have a lot of development in our rural areas. We have what's called an urban services area where we have water and sewer and our roads are in better shape. We're trying to focus the growth into areas we can handle it, where we can manage it. We're not going to slow down growth. We're not going to speed up growth. Growth is coming. We're the 3rd fastest growing locality. So we're just trying to work so that we can incentivize growth to get into areas where we can handle it and not have it sprawl out into the urban areas. So the board has considered these types of things several times in the past, and they haven't been able to come to a consensus on what they wanted to do. So what we're doing this time is we're going out and we're doing some public outreach. We're going to talk with the stakeholders, some of the large landowners, some of the builders, some of the conservationists, and get their input. Then we're going to have some roundtable discussions with them as well. And then we'll culminate this with some public meetings so we can get all the citizens involved and listen to what they have to say before we bring it back to the board so the board can consider it. We're also looking at our transportation system. As you know, we have a lot of traffic in this area. Keith Dayton has done an extensive look into all the different roads that we have, the county roads, not the main roads. VDOT will still continue to work on those. We just don't have the money to handle those. So we're looking at some of the smaller roads and having a priority list so when we do have funds available, we can put those in our CIP. Recreation, history, and culture was also a priority for the board. They want to maintain our recreational parks. We've done a lot of work since 2000 to build up some of our parks. We have a big sports tourism industry going where we bring in a lot of people. They stay in our hotels, and it's working well for us. Quality education. As you know, our schools are burgeoning, and we need to build a couple more so that we have a high school and an elementary school in our CIP. We want to work with the school system to have a joint team to go out and do site selection so that we can make sure that we consider whether or not it has all the infrastructure needs, if the topography is right, so that we buy a piece of land that isn't going to end up costing us more to develop than it does just to buy. You know, if you get something flat, you can build a nice, cheap, relatively speaking, high school, but if you get something that has terrible topography, it'll cost you more than just to develop it. Vibrant and exciting business community. Economic development is all of our jobs. That's what we'd like to say in the economic development world. We have a lot of processes and regulations that go through that all the businesses and builders and homeowners have to go through in order to get permits. We're looking at all those to make sure that they make sense and they work for the community. We're also trying to bring in more businesses so that we can reduce the tax rate on the residents. Dedicated, responsive public safety. Public safety is one of the cores of local government, and so obviously that's one of the board's primary responsibilities and concerns. And organizational excellence. Now this is a big deal. I don't know how many of you were here during the recession, but organizational excellence wasn't necessarily a priority of the board. This board, it is a priority, and the classic comp study was one of the ones that they were concerned about. So I think that is very promising for all of us as staff, that the board is concerned about us and wants to make sure that we are there for them in the future. Are there any questions? Yes.
County road versus VDOT road, what's the percentage or what's the?
Well, they're all
I thought they were all VDOT.
they're all county roads, but they're VDOT road maintained.
Okay.
That makes about as much sense as,
Right,
yeah.
clear as mud.
Yeah. So we don't maintain any of the roads. There are primary roads like Route 1 that just are too big for us to touch, really. Courthouse Road, we put a lot of money onto this project, but VDOT is managing it. 610, we did a PPTA project where we managed that project. VDOT was a little bit nervous about that, but we did it, we got it done. But what we're looking at is we don't have a whole lot of transportation money going forward. So we're not gonna be able to concentrate on the Butler Road past the Falmouth intersection. That project is just probably a little bit too expensive for us to handle. So we're looking at some of the roads, the more rural roads that need attention as we do continue to grow, and that we can, get some money and do some good on those. Now, we have project managers that will go in and do these projects, but once we're done, we turn them back over to the state for maintenance. And so if we just leave it up to VDOT, then VDOT picks the priorities and we don't have a lot to say. But the board wants to make some safety improvements primarily on these roads to keep it moving for the county. Any other questions? Okay, see, told you it would be quick. All right, and Fred will be up next to talk about our organizational values.
He does talk really fast, doesn't he? I'm Fred Presley, and I'm Deputy County Administrator, for those of you that don't know me. So I'm just going to run through some of the work the executive leadership team has been doing with respect to our vision and values. Back this fall, we had a 2-day retreat where we looked at this. We had originally scheduled this retreat to happen in the summer, but with all the work from the climate survey and then all the task force groups that were assembled, in consultation with our facilitator for this retreat, she said, you know what, why don't you wait till the task force groups are done? That way you can get all of their input, and we could probably glean a lot of information from that input as far as what the vision and values of this organization need to be. So that's what we did, and we spent a good portion of it, those 2 days, going over the reports from each of the task force groups to look at things like communications, things like education, the opportunities for learning and growth within the organization. All those types of things were covered in that process. So out of that 2 days, we did create a new set of vision and values. Now, has everyone seen them in your departments? Show of hands. So these are our draft vision and values. So we've asked all the department heads to go back to their departments and go over these vision and values. I'll cover them really quickly for you. So proactive ownership, the sense that you own this organization, that you feel committed to this organization. If you see something wrong, even if it's not your department, not my job, you address it because you own this organization. Infinite possibilities, that's the nature of innovation. We had an innovation group, innovation task force group that worked on this. So it's innovation, possibilities to come up with creative solutions to some of our problems. Customer first, that's pretty central to what we do. We serve. And customer first is everybody puts that customer first, whether the customer be someone from the outside coming in or another department that you're working with. They're all your customer. Stronger together. This notion of teams, the task force groups is a great example of that. We're looking more at these cross-functional teams, cross-departmental teams to deal with solutions, and that we can come up with solutions better if we work together. Ardent learners. We got a lot of feedback that the word ardent people didn't like a lot, but what that means is very enthusiastic. And what we want to approach as an organization is that everybody is constantly learning, and they're looking for more opportunities to learn and engage. And then finally, unwavering respect, and that's about how we treat each other. That's about communicating with each other. That's about respecting our coworkers. It's about respecting our customers coming in the door, but it's really about a deeper level of respect than we might have been used to in the past. So those are the visions, those are the values that we came up with. And the vision, real quickly, is that through a culture of enthusiasm, creativity, and limitless improvement, we serve to make a difference, okay? So we did ask all the departments to talk to you all and say, what do each of those values mean to you in your department? What does it look like in action when you're living those values? And then, contrary to that, what does it look like if you're not? And we got a lot of feedback from that, and we've been going through that, and we continue to work on fine-tuning those. We might change some words. We might do some adjustments there. But then each of you will also have in your departments now some explanation of what that looks like. What does it mean for your department to be have proactive ownership? How do you exemplify that? So those are important, and you're going to see that we're going to be moving forward for a launch of these new vision and values for the fall. And so we're working on that, but in the meantime, we're still going back and forth with departments and getting some more feedback on those. We're also in the process of holding an organizational leaders retreat, we asked every department to provide a list of current and emerging leaders within their department. And the idea is that we will hold a day-long retreat, which will involve talking about the vision and values more deeply, talking about what it means to be a high-performing organization, and what are the tools that we need to provide for all the departments and all the employees to get there. What you're seeing with this approach with Organizational Leaders Retreat, with the task force groups, with these committees that we're doing at the various levels, it was really working towards this notion of leadership at all levels, okay? And we want as many people engaged in that as possible. I think we have, Donna, was it like 80 people signed up for the organizational, or recommended for the Organizational Leaders Retreat so far. We're still taking names on that. So if you're interested, talk to your department head if they have, you know, if you haven't heard about that yet. But I think it's this type of work that we're really focused on, because if we don't have leadership at all levels, we will never compete with the Prince Williams and the Loudons and the Fairfaxes with respect to organizational excellence. And with all the challenges we're facing, as Tom mentioned earlier, with growth and the various other things, we have to be at that level. And it takes everybody. It's not just a bunch of people sitting up on the top floor figuring everything out, because that's not how it works. So I think it's an exciting time, really, to be here in Stafford. And so that's the work of the executive leadership team. You'll notice I'm calling it the executive leadership team. We've done a name change. It used to just be the leadership team. And we did that because we've also asked the departments to make sure they have department leadership teams. And depending on the size of the department, you might have division leadership teams. Again, leadership at all levels. And we just want to make that distinction. The idea is that they communicate up and down so that we all really have an opportunity to participate in this process. And we want to see you all as involved as you feel comfortable doing, because it's important to have your voice. And I'd be happy to take any questions. All right. With that, I'll turn it over to Donna to talk about Make a Difference.
Good morning. How are y'all doing? I'm Donna Kraus, for those who may not know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our Make a Difference Awards, or MAD. We like to call them the MAD Awards, because we all need to have a little fun, right? So they're going to be coming up in June 7th. And in the next couple of weeks, there's a couple of ways that you can become engaged in that process. As Fred just talked about, we really want to bring a lot of employees into all the different types of processes that we have. So there's two different ways that you can become involved. One is to think about nominating one of your peers within your department or within the organization for the Make a Difference Award. And a call for nominations will be coming out in about 2 weeks. And then the other way is, if you're interested in being on the committee that reviews all of the submissions to select the winners, there'll be a call out for volunteering for that process as well. And that'll happen in May when we receive all the submissions, and then have an opportunity to get together as a committee. Probably looking for about 15 people to do that, and we had that last year. I did take all of the feedback from that committee. There was a lot of great feedback on the structure of the awards and things like that, and have integrated that into the new process this year. So there'll be a little bit of changes with that. So, and then June 7th, we're going to hold the event at the Rouser Center again in the afternoon, and there will be popcorn, lots of different flavors. We're going to broaden our flavor of popcorn, and lots of candy too. So any questions about that? You all are waiting for Shannon, right? You have questions. So Shannon's going to talk about class and comp.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Wagner. I'm the Director of Human Resources. For those of you that I haven't met yet, I do see a lot of familiar faces in the room. So I'm going to give you a quick update on the Class and Comp project. Tom gave you a little bit of a primer on that. We've done a lot of really good work so far, and you all have participated in completing those JDQs. We received over 800 JDQs from the organization. I was really excited about that level of participation. It really helps us to take that analysis to a deeper level. So when we started the project, we we identified as Tom referenced, a new market. We looked a little bit at Northern Virginia. We looked a little bit in the Richmond area, which included Hanover, Henrico, and Chesterfield. We haven't traditionally pulled Henrico and Chesterfield in, but we felt like they were organizations that are similar to ours and that we occasionally do lose people to. And then, of course, the local market with Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania. In Northern Virginia, we had Prince William County as our closest northern neighbors. We had Loudoun County and Fauquier. And so we went and we took 95 benchmark jobs, took those to the comparative market. We also pulled some data from the state and the federal government, which we're looking at to make sure that they are a good match and they are a good, they're good to have in that market. And we got a lot of data back. And then we got the 800 JDQs from all of you. Thank you again for that. That is excellent work. And so our consultants have been able to take those two different types of data and combine them in their analysis. So they're looking at not only market competitiveness, but also internal equity. This is different than the market studies that we have done in the last several years. This is much more comprehensive. I'm really excited about this process. Tom shared that we are still in the process of analyzing the data, that we are working very closely with the consultants to make sure that we're all on the same page and and positions get placed in the right place, et cetera. We are not quite done. On Tuesday, April the 2nd, we're going to have a work session with the board. And we're going to talk a lot about the big picture. We're going to talk about the methodology that we used in the study and the work that has gone into it. We're going to talk about the analysis and the level of review that both the county and the consultants have been doing. We're going to talk about our plan for implementation and how this affects our policies and our structures and our pay plan. We are not going to have the final report yet. We are going to share with the board that we will bring that back to them probably in May, because as I said, we want to make sure we get it right, and we don't want to rush through the process. The recommendation we're going to make to the board on implementation, we are talking about a 2-year phase-in approach. And in year 1, we will implement a proposed new pay scale. So we're taking our current pay system, and based on market feedback and best practices, we will have more pay grades than we have today. Currently, we have a maximum of 15 pay grades, and we're going to move to 24. And we're going to structure it in such a way, we're going to make the ranges a little bit wider because our peers tend to do that. So our ranges aren't as competitive in the market as they could be, and so we're going to fix that. And the first part of year 1 is to move all of the positions to the place to the pay grade on the new pay scale and bring any employee who is below the minimum of that pay grade up to pay grade minimum. That's step 1. That'll be just a small portion of the money that we have set aside in the FY20 budget. And then we are still working on how we are going to move people within the pay scales. If we just moved everybody up to minimum and we move the pay scales, then pay compression, and so employees with 2 years of service and 15 years of service are going to be so close together, then it causes an issue. And so we need to think about pay compression. We need to think about how do we place people within the range in a place that is competitive and appropriate. So we're still working on the details of how that will work, but in year 1, we are proposing that we would move folks 50% to wherever the target place in that pay range will be. And then in year 2, we would go up to 100% of that market target. We're also looking at some key positions that maybe experience significant turnover or have significant expectations on training, which makes recruitment and turnover very challenging. And so we're thinking about strategies to help with those positions as well. I think that's the majority of what I had. The study so far has shown that as an organization, we are about 8 to 9% below the market. Of course, individual positions, some positions are right at market. There's a couple that might be above market, and then there are some that are behind the market in varying degrees. But on average, the organization as a whole is about 8 to 9% behind the market that we surveyed. So we definitely have some work to do to be more competitive. We want to, as Tom said, we want to keep you all here, and in order to do that, we need to make sure we have competitive pay and benefits. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are we still going to continue hiring people at the low thing?
We are talking about that. The short answer is we don't, our current policy kind of suggests that you come in at minimum, maybe a little bit higher if you have some significant levels of experience above what the position requires. But we are talking about, does that still make sense? How do we bring new people in? We want to make sure we're doing it in a way that to attract folks. We also don't want to bring people in higher than existing employees would be with similar. We are definitely talking about that. Oh. Yes, thank you. So one determination we have made is that nobody is going to lose pay as a result of this study. So as I said, there are some positions who are being shown to be above the market rate, and maybe the pay grade or the pay range goes down a little bit. But we are not going to take pay away from anybody. So that you can certainly be reassured of that. And then another thing that we're going to do that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past, as Tom mentioned, the proposed budget has a 2.5% pay increase. And in the past, we did that first. And that kind of helped pay for the market adjustments. We're not going to do it that way. The pay increase will come after. If you are eligible for a market increase, you will get that first. And then the pay increase, whether it's 2.5 or 5 or somewhere in between, it'll come after the market adjustments.
Shannon, you mentioned year 1 and year 2. Can we assume that that's going to be 2020 and 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
So you will continue doing the 2.5 pay increase off of a current salary, not off of a midpoint scale, right?
It will not be off of the midpoint. It will be off of your current salary after a market adjustment if you receive one.
Correct, but sometimes employers provide the 2.5% off of a midpoint so that the people who are below the midpoint get to the midpoint quicker, and the people above the midpoint don't reach their maximum capacity in their pay grade as quickly.
Yes, and I actually think we have, so the question is, are we going to base the pay increase on the midpoint? Because there are organizations that will do that, which essentially gives a little bit more money to those that are below the midpoint and a little bit less on a percentage basis on those above the midpoint. It does give the same dollar amount for everybody that is classified in the same pay grade. And I do believe we did that in 1 year prior. That is not the approach that we were talking about this year. We are talking about basing it on current pay. However, we are looking at that approach as far as implementation goes of the market implementation and how we place folks within the range, and giving consideration to our priority is to get folks to market that have an appropriate level of experience to be there. But after we in the past we stopped there and we didn't move anybody past market midpoint, and so we are looking at moving folks higher through the range, but maybe at a slower pace. Yes, sir.
In May, when you finally present the final report, will existing or current employees see the path forward for the 2-year implementation, or is it just a portion and then we'll further refine it for the next year?
Yes, we will have individual information for each employee so that you can know that by year 2, we are expecting that you will be at X place. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the results are looking at a market competitiveness as well as internal equity.
Mhm.
Can you define internal equity, please?
Yes. So when I talked about internal equity, what I was talking about is less about people and more about the position structure. So of course, when you do a market study, if you put all of your positions out to the market study, the respondents aren't going to respond because 400 individual jobs, and they're going to say, well, we don't have time to respond to that. So the approach is we put 95 jobs on the market study, and that has an impact. You know, some of those jobs are, you know, have 2 or 3 levels, and of course you can apply that. But the purpose of the JDQs and how that relates to internal equity is that we really kind of looked at the skills required, the education required, the responsibilities of the positions within the county, and we are looking at trying to align positions with similar levels of responsibility on a similar pay grade, so that, you know, even if X position wasn't in the market analysis, we understand the relationship between that position and the benchmark positions, and we can make sure that the whole organization is market competitive, and then the internal structure makes sense. Mhm. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
It sounds like you're going more off of job description and less off of job title. Is that what I, when you're doing the comparison, like if you're looking at, it may, you know, job may be called A, but they're doing the same task as somebody else who's job B, you're comparing the task with the JDQ versus just going off of job titles? Is that?
Yes, the question is the analysis that we're doing, and it's not just based on, or is it not just based on job titles, and it is instead based on the job description. I would clarify that we actually, while the consultants definitely have all of our job descriptions, some of them are not up to date. So the highest level of focus, we're on those JDQs that everybody filled out, because that is the most up-to-date and relevant information that we have, as well as the job description. An example of that is our administrative jobs, that we have a lot of folks in a general administrative title. In some places that continues to make sense, but in other places the consultants are discovering that maybe a more specified job title would be appropriate. So we are definitely not just looking at the job title. Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean that some current job titles are being reclassified?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. And to restate the question, that there will be job titles that change and are reclassified in this process.
Do we know what those are?
We're still working, we know what a lot of them are, but we're still working through some of the details to make sure we get them right. We're probably about 80 to 85% done at this point, so we're getting really close, but we're not 100% there. Yes, ma'am.
When will we know if our position is affected and how it's affected?
Probably by May. We will have that information, and we will be giving it not only to the departments, but we will send something out to all employees as well to let you know that, you know, we have the results of the study. You'll get a copy of the final report, and then individuals will be able to know whether the position moved and whether your pay is affected. Yes. Any more questions? Lots of good questions today.
What happens if your position wasn't in the study? Like, you try moving into a position, and when you move into that position, the person that had that position moves into another position, so your position didn't get put in the study.
I would say that all county positions are part of this study, and that we are, that's another thing that we're making sure that we look at. Of course, as I said, not all of the positions were in the market study, but between the market study and the JDQs and existing descriptions, we're able to go through and make sure that all positions will be affected by this study. With that, let's hand it back to Tom. Thank you.
So we talked about a lot of really important things today. Obviously, that last topic is something on everybody's mind. This information will be out to you all. You'll know exactly what the results of the study said. It is not about a group of employees that we put in a benchmark group. It's about all of us. So the whole scale changes. Everybody's impacted by this. This is the most comprehensive study, reclassification, and everything that we've done in a number of years here. So really significant movement forward. This wouldn't have happened if the board hadn't identified it as a priority in the strategic plan, if it hadn't been something that was important to them. So stay tuned, and we're going to make sure that we're fully communicating with you about all the parts of this. So we talked about current events with the budget. We talked about long-range things with the strategic plan and how they're actually playing out in terms of our organization and some of the changes that we're doing and some of the improvements that we're trying to make. The central theme of all of this, and we want to keep saying to you, is we need you to be involved in the ownership of this organization by coming to these meetings, giving us your input, giving us your suggestions. You're going to see some more opportunities to do that in the future, and we will be coming out, as Fred said, to talk to you more about values and vision over the summer and then into the fall. We are taking your input right now, and we're making some tweaks to the things that you saw based on that feedback. So please continue to stay engaged and come to these meetings. Bring your friends and neighbors, have them come. We can fill this whole place up, and please continue to stay involved and engaged in all that we're doing. Any final questions or thoughts, comments? And thank you for making a comment earlier. All things are game for this discussion. Yes, ma'am.
We didn't really talk a whole lot about the health insurance on the new budget. Are there any big changes coming to the health insurance?
The answer generally is no. I don't think we're having any changes in benefits, and then the premiums are really not going to be changed. One of the things that we're going to do this year is talk about the implementation of this market study, not make changes to health insurance that would then take some money away from you. We know in the long term we're out of market in some places, so we may have to tweak in future years. But we'd like to fully implement this market study before we do anything like that. And I don't expect huge things on the horizon, but there probably will be some tweaks. And if you're in any organization anywhere, that's happening with healthcare now, so it's not an unusual thing. Nothing drastic out there.
I'd like to
Yes.
clarify, there might be some very minor changes to the premium by $1 or $2, similar to what we had last year.
Okay.
The structure and the philosophy is all the same.
Okay. Yeah, so no major things on the horizon. Little tweaks perhaps here and there. If that's $1 a paycheck, obviously it's not anything too dramatic, but nothing unusual happening there. Yes, Carol.
Is there any more discussion on the retirees' insurance and what's going on with that?
Yes, we are looking at the policy on retiree insurance and how it's been implemented and whether we might need to make some adjustments, but there have been no conclusions yet. We've had some engagement with the board. They've given some feedback, and it'll be back on the agenda. I think we decided in April or May it'll be back on the agenda, probably more like May. Yep. Yes, Mr. Smith.
I noticed that not everybody raised their hand when Fred asked if they had been discussing organizational values in their department. If you did not raise your hand, please go back to your department head and ask him why not.
He really means that. We talk to the department heads at our monthly meetings and say, if we hear from your employees that you haven't heard about this, we're going to tell them to come to you. So, other questions? Yes.
Quick question that wasn't really discussed, but I remember at some point in one of the task force meetings or EAC something, that there was supposed to be implemented a possibly anonymous suggestion box, email, routing. I haven't seen that, or I can't find it.
It is in the works.
Okay.
And it is, what we're trying to do is to not put a little box and you put a little piece of paper in and then we have to collect it up, but instead to give you access to a site where you can put your innovative and creative ideas, and then we can sort them and pull things to the top and then actually put some action plans behind those. So we're really just trying to maximize the use of technology to do that. And Mike, if you want to say anything else on that.
Yeah, so Paul Carano there was the chair of the Innovation Task Force, and one of their major recommendations, like you mentioned, was to have a way to generate ideas and come up with innovative ways of doing things and suggestions. And we are in the process of buying the software. It's called Q Markets, and there'll be a rollout, and there'll be ways where we will launch campaigns. I don't know if Paul wants to add anything to it, but
Yeah, one of our next steps, once it gets through the
good. So we have an innovation team now, and they're sort of helping manage this, and we're going to be reaching out and getting some more folks involved to help make decisions on what should move forward and in what time frame. Okay? So a lot underway on that based on some good suggestions from you all. Stay tuned. Some things are coming forward. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know when Jabber is going to be fully functional.
When what's going to be fully?
Jabber.
Oh, so that, I'll take that one. So,
And repeat the question if you would, so people can.
so Jabber is a instant messaging tool that we have been testing within IT and with a few select groups of folks outside of the department. We're working through to find a solution that will allow us to use it countywide. We have the licenses, but it's a question of the Freedom of Information Act and requirements that we record all communication just like we do with email. We have to do that with instant messaging. And so once we have a way of effectively archiving it, we will roll it out to everybody. I hope that helps explain it. But it's a nice way to be able to communicate. Like when you're on the phone or something, you can send text messages back and forth using your computer. And it's not a cell phone or anything like that. Any questions?
Final questions? Not seeing anyone, and we're getting about at the end of our time. In fact, a little bit over. Thank you all again for coming, and stay tuned. We'll be back in touch.